Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto builds his harem on the wave mission part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Sunrise was displaying a breathtaking panorama across the ocean surface. This however went unnoticed by a lone figure sitting at the end of the pier. Damn it. As if things weren't bad enough for me already, why can't I, just for once, get a break? Yesterday had been pretty bad, even if you took into consideration that they had pretty much accomplished their mission. No one had died but Sasuke had been seriously injured by multiple Senbon needles that had hit his vital spots. Sakura, of course, flew off the handle and gave Naruto the worst tongue lashing ever. Seriously, only thing that kept the tongue lashing from becoming a real, and quite brutal, lashing was Sasuke, who in his incapacitated state diverted Sakura's attention from Naruto. It really sucks to be me. And to think that I probably saved the whole team out there. But do I get any thanks? Hell no. I get viciously scolded by Sakura-chan because I somehow obviously held back her precious Sasuke-kun and thus caused his injuries. Well, it wasn't all that bad. Kakashi-sensei had actually asked if he was alright and after giving him a once-over had commended him on a job well done. Tazuna and his family had showered Naruto with thanks, something the boy was certainly not used to, for saving Tsunami and Inari. After they had settled in for the night, things had gone from bad to worse, which was exactly why he was sitting on the end of the pier, watching sunrise with unseeing eyes. These very interesting musings were cut short however, by a hand that suddenly appeared on his shoulder eliciting a loud scream of, "Kya!" from the startled youth. Naruto turned around in a rush while yelling, "Kakashi-sensei! Don't use your ninja stealth to sneak up on people." Kakashi's sweat dropped. Naruto, I wasn't trying to sneak up on you. I even called out your name a couple of times." Kakashi peered at the boy who was still trying to control his erratic heartbeat. His visible eye narrowed slightly when he noticed the troubled look on Naruto's usually cheery and carefree face. "Are you alright, Naruto? I mean, you've been out here for some time now and breakfast is ready." This statement caused a loud outburst of, "Nani? Breakfast already? But I just came here. I must have spaced out or something, there's no other explanation." Well, might as well tell him and face the music. Naruto scrunched his face in a thoughtful pose and tapped the side of his nose with his finger. "Anyo, Kakashi-sensei, I need to talk to you about yesterday and, well, you know who." His words caused an instant reaction on Kakashi, whose visible eye narrowed quite noticeably. He didn't give any other visible signs and only offered a nod of confirmation and told Naruto that they would speak after breakfast. The super bridge builder Tazuna, Tsunami and Inari were in a cheery mood. Overall however the mood in the breakfast table was gloomy at best. Sakura looked like she hadn't slept well, which gave her all the more reason to berate Naruto again for endangering the life of her Sasuke-kun. Naruto, still mulling over the events of the night before and dreading the outcome of his talk with Kakashi, mostly ignored Sakura's speech. Until it was accentuated by a light rap on the head by Sakura, who now was getting more pissed because she was being completely ignored. "Naruto, you jerk. Don't you dare to ignore me when I'm talking to you." Naruto, wide-eyed, was trying to sputter out a defensive reply when he noticed that it was being ignored as Sakura was back in her rant, "Sleep a wink because I was so worried about Sasuke-kun." Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto tuned her out and was again immersed in his own problems. Kakashi, the Junin instructor of Team 7, was thoughtful as well. He was going over possibilities as to what exactly did Naruto want to talk about. Certainly Kyuubi wasn't loose or in control of the boy. Best possible explanation he could come up was the same thing, he wanted to talk to Naruto anyway. He had sensed Kyuubi's chakra on the bridge. It had been brief but still, and he was certain that the boy had felt the difference. Yes, that had to be it. Naruto knew that the 9 tails was sealed in his belly and had felt, quite intensely he surmised, its chakra and now wanted someone to talk about it. There were of course other possibilities, but this was the most likely scenario. When breakfast was over, there was yet another explosion of temper tantrum when Sakura, who had been on a low boil, was informed that she was to guard Tazuna-san while he was working on the bridge. Sasuke-kun is seriously hurt, so I need to stay here and look after him. Naruto should go and guard the bridge and make himself useful for once. Sakura was stopped by Kakashi's cool explanation that Naruto had used a tremendous amount of chakra during his fight and needed some time to recover, and that only thing Sasuke needed was uninterrupted rest. Naruto on the other hand had stayed uncharacteristically quiet through the entire exchange and observed the byplay between his teammate and sensei. The result of his observations was disheartening. Sakura didn't even care whether he was hurt or not. Sheesh. She really doesn't seem to care whether or not I'm alright. Only that I'm somehow keeping her from Sasuke, and to think that I really had a crush on her too. Consciously voicing the thought brought forth a revelation. He really didn't have a crush on the pink-haired Kunoichi anymore. Not that he didn't like her or anything, but the infatuation was gone. He shrugged wistfully. Probably that damn dream, stupid dumbass fox, going through my entire life and taking me along for the ride. After Tazuna, with an irate Sakura in tow, had left to oversee the construction of the bridge, Kakashi led Naruto towards the area where Team 7 had learned chakra control in form of tree climbing. When they arrived, he motioned Naruto to sit on a nearby log and asked, "So Naruto, what was it that you wanted to talk about? Does it have something to do with?" He paused, searching a proper word when Naruto spoke up. "Fuzzy, yeah, I wanted to talk about Kyuubi, the seal, and a whole lot of things actually." There was a moment of silence, after which Kakashi, in almost apologetic tone of voice, asked if the seal was still intact. Naruto nodded in answer and then explained, "The seal is still intact and active." It's kinda hard to explain, but apparently this was supposed to happen. Seeing the unvoiced question in his sensei's eye, he continued in a tired tone, "The seal was activated, and now Kyuubi has woken from her long slumber." Thoughts were racing circles in Kakashi's mind. The seal was supposed to awaken Kyuubi. Her. Kyuubi is a she. How? When? The seal was supposed to. Mustering his willpower, he snapped back into focus. His entire list of possibilities as to why Naruto had wanted to talk was blown to hell. Then again, he should have anticipated that, as Naruto certainly lived up to his name as the #1 ninja in surprising people. Focusing again on the matter at hand, Kakashi began to run a mental list of scenarios ranging from the best to the worst. At the best, Kyuubi was rapidly being absorbed by the seal and the whole ordeal would be over. At the worst, well, Kakashi shuddered. He really didn't want to think about the worst-case scenario. Calming himself, the Junin reached for his Konoha Hitai-8, uncovering his single Sharingan eye. In an even voice he ordered simply, "Tell me everything. Leave nothing out." Naruto was startled. He didn't know how Kakashi would react to his news. But to uncover his Sharingan, something that he only did when facing an enemy, was ominous to say the least. In a shaky voice he began to recount the events that led to the seal's activation. "Then I saw Sasuke go down and that Haku guy started gloating, so I kinda snapped. I don't know exactly what I did, but I reached in to draw out every last drop of chakra so I could kill the bastard. That's when it happened, I guess." His voice dropped into a whisper. "Things went a little hazy, but then I could feel this enormous amount of power that surged through the seal and into my body. I could have ripped Haku apart piece by piece. And I almost did because I was so mad at him." Naruto hung his head in shame at this. He continued in a more subdued tone, "After I calmed down, the power seemed to flow back into the seal, but there was a small throbbing or prodding of sorts. I guess it was stupid not to say anything sooner, but everything was going on so fast that I didn't really have time. Besides, it stopped soon enough anyway. The thing is, I kept feeling something though, the presence of something, alien but still, familiar. It was weird. Anyway, after we turned in for the night, things went really weird." Kakashi had to squash a sudden urge to strangle the boy for stating something like that. As if using demonic chakra to defeat your enemy wasn't really weird. Then again, this was Naruto, the guy who carried around the most powerful demon ever, so maybe the usual standards didn't apply. Naruto stared off into the distance, looking effectively zoned out. Kakashi was about to prod him on when he continued his narrative. Last night I dreamed. I saw my entire life go by in a flash, and I have to say it wasn't very pleasant. He frowned at the memory and the feelings that it brought up. The dream had been bad, all right. The cold stares, the hatred, the numerous beatings, rip-offs and other cruelties he had been forced to live with his entire life. He had watched as the other kids in the orphanage got birthday and Christmas presents when he got nothing, how other students in the academy received extra lessons, instead of punishment, from the teachers if they failed in something. And he remembered the pain from every one of those injustices, now freshly imprinted into his mind. But there had been the good moments too. The old man Hokage who had looked after him as often as his duties permitted. Iruka-sensei who had acknowledged him as Uzumaki Naruto, not as the demon Kyuubi. And there had been a memory of the Yondaime Hokage, of the words he had said to him, the trust he had placed in him. Kakashi too began frowning as he listened to his pupil tell about his life. He had guessed that Naruto didn't have an easy childhood, but never had he expected the sheer amount of abuse the boy had been through. It was amazing that he was sane, much less civil. It also explained his lack of ninja skills. No sparring partner to practice taijutsu, no one to instruct him on the finer points of molding chakra and so on. This was certainly something he had to bring up with the Hokage the next time he spoke with the old man. The dream ended on the moment I reached through the seal. After that I started to drift in a void or something. That's when she came to me, telling me that I had to wake up and then find my center so that we could speak. She stressed that it was important and that time was running out. Then I woke up. Naruto cleared his throat and glanced expectantly at Kakashi. He was not disappointed as the Junin was completely immersed in the story. Afterwards I just laid there for a few moments trying to regain my bearings and then went outside and ended up sitting on the pier. And then I decided to do as Kyuubi told me and began my UMMH meditation exercises. Flashback. Naruto was trying hard. He tried to remember what they had said about meditating in the academy. Finally he gave up and decided just to relax and calm his mind, or something. And then suddenly he wasn't on the pier anymore. Instead he was sitting cross-legged in a dark, dank hallway. He stood up and surveyed his surroundings. It was desolate to say the least. There was at least an inch of murky water on the floor, and more water was dripping from broken pipes on the ceiling. In the distance there was an eerie glow, and the alien presence that he had felt was coming from that general direction. After wandering in the corridors for a few minutes, Naruto finally arrived at what he surmised was his destination. He could only gape at the massive gates that had, he noted, a scrap of paper with the word seal written on it. But what really unnerved him was the enormous presence that loomed behind the said gates, presence that was in a form of an animal with 9 swaying tails to be exact. There before him was Kyuubi, the most powerful demon ever to walk the surface of the world. Naruto struggled to compose himself. A task which came almost impossible as he suddenly became aware of 2 large eyes, crimson eyes with slit pupils, that were focused on him. Resolutely squashing thoughts of his own insignificance, he put up a brave face and called out in what he hoped was cool and Kakashi-like manner. Yo, you Kyuubi, you wanted to see me. There was a moment of silence as the eyes seemed to bore holes into his skull. What do you think, brat? Have any other resident demons in you that I don't know about? The reply dripped with sarcasm. Before Naruto could respond, the voice continued, and yes, I wanted to talk to you. Naruto, however, was not intimidated by the tone. He had after all heard sarcastic and condescending remarks all his life, and was now getting the same treatment from the one ultimately responsible for his screwed up life. Now tell me just exactly why should I want to talk with you? This is all your fault anyway. Kyuubi tried to interject, but Naruto was on a high gear and could not be stopped. And just who the hell do you think you are? Going through my memories like that, you bastard. She blinked, then blinked again. This certainly had never happened before. Never had she in her long years seen a mortal stand before her like this, screaming bloody murder and demanding answers. Usually most mortals began to quiver when they faced even lesser demons, let alone one of the Biju. And here the brat stood, angry, his initial fear forgotten. Granted, the brat carried within him the strongest of the demons and had during her slumber absorbed some of her power, but still, the kidling shows promise. He's had a hard life, but still he's loyal to those bastards. If it was up to me, I'd devour them in a heartbeat. Now how do I stop this irritating rant? Kyuubi drew in air and then let loose a deafening roar. A roar that effectively cut off Naruto's list of profane names for the demon and actually sent him lying on his back in the inch-deep water. Kyuubi roared again, this time with less force, bringing the dazed boy out of his shock. Now you listen to Kit. We don't have much time and you can berate me all you want after you get your facts straight. But right now we have business to attend to. Having Naruto's undivided attention, she proceeded to explain the inner workings of the seal to the bewildered boy. After about 15 minutes of explaining, arguing and yet more explaining, they had reached an understanding. So basically you can't do jack about it then. The seal is now active and is draining you. You want revenge against the people who summoned you to this plane and attempted to possess your powers, then set you against Konoha where you were sealed in me. And in return for this revenge you surrender more of your body to the seal and tweak my body a bit, give me lessons and all that stuff. Naruto glared at the demon. And you say that you could actually just do this tweaking. Anyway, so I really don't have a say in it, but you chose to warn me because you thought it was nice. Heartwarming concern coming from a demon. Kyuubi growled at the boy and slammed her claws against the gate. I tell you, brat, it wasn't my choice to attack your Konoha. I actually considered Konoha to be one of the more decent ninja villages around. But as it is, I chose to warn you beforehand so you may warn that sensei of yours, so we, and I mean we as in you and me, won't get killed before you have time to explain it all to him. You see, Kit, you die equals I die. And I definitely don't want to die just yet. Besides, you aren't completely human anymore, not with the seal transferring my power to you when I lay in my slumber, so consider this as the next step. Besides, there are some cool things you can do with a little help. Then there was a strange sound emanating from the cage. A sound that Naruto suddenly recognized as giggling. The fearsome and omnipotent Kyuubi no Kitsune was giggling. The blonde ninja sweat dropped. Anyo, are you giggling? The large eyes blinked at this, then a vicious smile accentuated by a row of gleaming white teeth came visible. Yes, I was simply anticipating the fear those ignorant peasants that have mistreated you all your life will feel when they find out that you have the Queen of Foxes backing you up. Naruto began to tremble visibly. The Queen of Foxes, that would imply that you are a girl. The question was answered by another set of giggles and growl. Then there was a poof in the cage and suddenly by the gate stood a female, humanoid but not quite human. Naruto noticed several things at once. A. She had fox ears on top of her head, which he noted was covered with red hair. B. She had quite a voluptuous figure that was simply oozing seductiveness, and well, C. She was quite. D. He felt something warm trickling down his face. Now that has never happened before. Oh no, am I turning into a pervert like all the other adults? His nosebleed, as slight as it was, and his frantic expression didn't go unnoticed by Kyuubi, who poofed back into her original form. Once again baring her fangs, she inquired in a seductive tone, that answer your question, And don't worry, even though you are quite amazing a specimen, I wouldn't, even if it was possible, try to seduce you. It would be too much like masturbation. But now get out of here and go find that sensei of yours. At the dismissal, Naruto suddenly found himself sitting at the pier and noticed to his amazement that it was dawn already. He began once more ponder about the events of the night and the problems of his life in general. Also he did on occasion wonder what that masturbation thing that Kyuubi had mentioned was. End flashback. Kakashi stared. He simply stared. Here he was listening to what could only be described as a product of an active imagination, with the exception that it wasn't. He shook his head to clear his thoughts. Now Naruto, what exactly is Kyuubi going to do to you? Naruto scratched the back of his head. Well, she said that she'd let the seal to take some of her essence and transfer it into me, specifically in the eyes, ears and nose. She also said that she'd put some of her power into me in general, increasing my physical abilities, something that I already have experience in. She also said that there might be some visible changes, especially in the eyes, which I understand should become slitted. Kakashi was about to ask if Naruto was really okay with this when he was cut short by the genin, who stated that if Kyuubi was right then there was nothing they could do about it, and that the adults in Konoha feared and hated him whether he had slitted eyes or not. Seeing as there was no way to argue against that logic, Kakashi relented. Moving on, he then grilled Naruto for details on the actual tweaking, and gave up soon after, as Naruto really didn't understand the finer mechanics of the process, nor had Kyuubi bothered to explain them. As there was nothing really left to do, he asked his final question, "So then, you ready for this?" The silence stretched. Then Naruto slowly shook his head to indicate negative. In answer to raised eyebrow, he said in a slow, almost fearful tone, "Kakashi-sensei, there was something more in my dream that I didn't tell you about, something from the very beginning. I saw the Yondaime and he gave me something and said some things, and I just need some sort of confirmation. I mean, you were his student, so you knew him, right?" Naruto drew a breath and then reached into his shirt, pulling out a golden chain with a locket attached. Kakashi's reaction to the sight was immediate. He inhaled sharply, then promptly fell to his butt. Blinking at the older man's reaction, Naruto began to fear the worst. Maybe the locket was a mark of a traitor or something. Kakashi was, however, fixated on the locket dangling from Naruto's hand. He then quickly reached into his own shirt and produced a similar locket. That locket belonged to the Yondaime Hokage. I had thought it was destroyed along with his body. Where did you get it? The question was delivered with a dosage of menace that promised instant pain if the answer was wrong. Naruto gulped and proceeded to explain, "I've always had this, it's the only thing that really is my own. In the dream I saw Yondaime looming over me, he slipped the locket on me and then said some things." Naruto hung his head, only to have a hand slip under his chin and raise his face upwards, face to face with now almost gentle-looking Kakashi. He gulped again and quoted, "Good luck, be brave, and remember that your mother and I love you, son, forgive me." It was some time before either could move. Kakashi because of the shock from such a bold statement, and Naruto because Kakashi was holding his head steady. Finally the older man broke from his reverie and grabbed Naruto's locket with one hand, his hand with the other. He needed to know, and there was only one way short of asking the Hokage, and if he had chosen to keep the boy a secret, there were implications for deeper reasons. "Open it." Naruto shook his head. "I tried, but the trigger seems to be broken, so it won't open." Almost growling with frustration, Kakashi all but screamed, "Channel chakra into your finger and try again, you." Naruto blinked, then proceeded to do as ordered. He could see the Junin tensing as he placed his finger on the locket, and then with an audible snap the locket popped open, after which the Junin promptly collapsed. When he had regained his senses, Kakashi offered his own locket for Naruto to open up. After they both held to their respective lockets in their hands, Kakashi spoke up. "These lockets were made by Arashi-sensei, one for him and one for his wife. Only they or their offspring could open these lockets. You recognize, of course, your father, the Yondaime Hokage, Kazama Arashi." Naruto gave a court nod at this, focusing instead on the picture of a woman who had been his mother. He noticed that the woman was quite beautiful and had a silver hair that reminded him of someone, couldn't be it. "And the woman on the picture is Ayame, your mother, and my sister." He sat on the ground and buried his face into his hands, weeping. Naruto was again shocked, speechless, a common occurrence for the day. Hell, he could deal with seals, awakening demons, and even with finding that he was related to the Yondaime, but to be related to Kakashi-sensei. It took another 15 minutes before Kakashi regained himself. He slowly pulled down his mask, revealing unmarred face that strongly resembled Ayame, his sister and Naruto's mother. Naruto could only stare. His sensei, the feared copy ninja Kakashi, had a face of a poster boy. Really, he could see why the Junin chose to wear a mask. It would deter potential fangirl hordes and no one would really take him seriously as a capable ninja if he looked like that. Naruto chortled and then suddenly was rolling on the ground laughing at the now bewildered Kakashi. "Ah, Naruto, this is a serious matter. I mean, I'm sorry. I was told that you died with Ayame Nichan. I've been blind not to see how much you look like Arashi-sensei." Seeing that Naruto was still out of it, he placed a light kick on the boy's side, effectively snapping him out of his fit of laughter. "Hey you, I'm trying to apologize here." There was a dumbfounded look in the boy's eyes, which was suddenly replaced by understanding as the pieces fell into place. "If you feel sorry for me, then save it. I don't need your pity. And if you didn't know who I was, then you didn't. Only thing I really want to know is, would you have taken me in had you known?" Naruto spoke the last part clearly and with an even voice, while observing the Junin carefully. There was a plethora of emotions that played across Kakashi's face, settling finally to a mask of determination. He didn't reply but decided to kneel in front of the boy and hold him by the shoulders. Without a word, he simply nodded. This gesture was returned in kind by Naruto, who flashed him a real smile, not the usual happy-go-lucky smile that he showed the world, but a real one that indicated true happiness. He had after all found family. In the ninja world, especially during missions, moments of happiness were a rare commodity. Naruto was reminded of this by a sudden pulsating feeling from his stomach. He quickly composed himself and shook Kakashi from his reverie as well. "Kakashi-sensei, I think it's starting soon. Kyuubi said that my eyes and ears might be a little sensitive after she's done with me, so she said that I should be placed into a dark and quiet place after I pass out from the exhaustion. I have a pair of sunglasses in my backpack, so if you could put them next to me or something when you leave me, it would be nice." Kakashi was going to inquire more about the passing out from exhaustion part, which Naruto had neglected to mention before, but all inquiries were cut short when Naruto suddenly cried in pain and keeled over. It was not a nice thing to watch, even for someone who had seen the horrors of a war between ninja villages, or the destruction wrought by Kyuubi. Naruto curled into a fetal position while whimpering in pain. Soon enough, the whimpers turned into moans and then into blood-curdling screams that echoed through the forest. Finally, after what seemed like hours, Naruto went limp and passed into blissful unconsciousness. Shaking his head wistfully, Kakashi picked the unconscious boy on his arms and headed back towards their temporary home. Naruto was hovering on the edge of consciousness. He was becoming aware of the multitude of sounds and smells that assailed his ears and nose. As he was about to open his eyes, he remembered Kyuubi's warning about the sensitivity of his new eyes. Suddenly he snapped awake, keeping his eyes shut and almost yelping in amazement from the multitude of things he could sense. He could clearly hear Sasuke breathing a few meters away, smell his breath. Concentrating, he began to go through the sensations. He noticed that he could focus on sounds. He could hear Tsunami cooking downstairs, his own heartbeat and the heartbeat of Sasuke and, quite surprisingly, Inari, who was stationed outside the door, probably guarding the room where his hero was resting. The smells were no less interesting, though very much less appealing. He himself, and Sasuke, he was happy to note, reeked of sweat and dirt. The room, which to casual eyes seemed clean, was actually anything but. There was also a mouth-watering aroma of cooking food that was wafting from downstairs. He could identify the smell of frying fish and cooking rice, but the other smells eluded him. Shrugging, he decided that he would probably spend the rest of his days cataloging new smells. Before he could even start to open his eyes, he suddenly heard, "Kyuubi, enjoying yourself, I see. Don't let the multitude of new smells overcome you. Most smells are fairly common and you'll learn to associate them soon enough. As for your eyes, I suggest you try to find those sunglasses. It might make the experience less painful." Naruto almost blew up at this and decided to scream back at his mind. You son of a, air you bitch, you said that it would hurt a little, I've never been in such a pain in my life. And you said I'd pass out from the exhaustion. He could almost feel Kyuubi shrugging. Well, it hurt a little, at least I was in slight pain, then again you are weak. And before you ask, yes, we can now communicate directly. But as it is, please wear the sunglasses and then come see me. Naruto shot a parting curse inwards, but when he received no reply, he decided to do the demon's bidding. Feeling around, he found his sunglasses, which he promptly put on, and to his delight a glass of water. Feeling thirsty, he quaffed the water only to find out that among other things his sense of taste had been enhanced as well. Showing the fact aside, he tried to relax and soon enough found himself in a vastly different place. Cracking open one eye and feeling only slight discomfort, he soon opened his other eye, and almost popped both eyes from their sockets. The corridor, previously dark due to the broken light fixtures, was now bright as day. The amount of details he could make out, in what seemed bright environment, made him decide that wearing sunglasses had been a good idea. He started towards Kyuubi's den in brisk pace and soon enough arrived at his destination. He felt Kyuubi's eyes on himself the moment he entered the room. There was something in the gaze that made him uneasy. It was as if he was being evaluated. Following instructions from the demon, he turned around once, then again. Naruto began to grow frustrated and was about to yell when Kyuubi simply stated, "Oops, oops. What the hell does she mean? Oops." Now Naruto was really getting pissed and let it show by swishing his tails in agitation. Then it hit, "Tails, I have tails. You freaking bastard. What the hell did you do to me? I have, one, no two tails." Kyuubi was amazed. Now she really had made a mistake by letting the seal absorb a bit too much of her essence. Not that it mattered to her, but the boy might not be able to adjust if the pace was too demanding. And he already had two tails, quite the individual indeed. She shifted her perception to observe the boy and there it was, most interesting. She decided to stop the boy, who was in a full rant mode about villagers, lynch mobs and pitchforks. Control yourself, kidling, you really don't have tails. I did give you more than I intended, the seal you see. However, I seriously doubt you have tails in the real world. Not all the time anyway. If you haven't noticed, your hands sport a nice set of claws and you seem to have developed quite the fangs too. She simply had to stop to giggle a bit at the sight of Naruto comically poking his extended canines with his tongue. That and the befuddled look he had when he stared at his fingers. Getting over her mirth, she continued. Now your claws, fangs, eyes and tails are all surging with my chakra. I think it's safe to assume that you normally retain your blue eyes and your normal, if insignificant, teeth and nails. And you will have no tails. However, should you tap into my chakra, or channel your own chakra into those body parts, you would manifest them as you have now. As it is, I'm most curious about your eyes. You certainly should try channeling chakra into them when you have the chance. I would think it possible that you might exhibit some abilities normally associated with more advanced bloodline limits, which by the way are remnants of demonic heritage. Now get out of here and go get something to eat. Having smelled those foods after a 14-year beauty sleep has made me ravenous. At this, Naruto stuck out his tongue at the demon. Ha ha ha, the joke's on you then. I can eat but you can't, right? The last part was added in a more hesitant tone caused by a widening, and quite toothy, grin. Kit, I can now touch the world just like you can. Maybe I can't do anything aside from watching, but still, I see, smell and hear what you do and I taste what you taste. You eat and I get nourished and so forth. The seal works both ways, you know. On that note, while I think ramen is tasty and everything, you really should expand your menu. It's not healthy. If it wasn't for me, you'd be suffering from various ailments due malnutrition. And again, before you ask, yes, you can keep on eating ramen only, but it will seriously affect your physique, like say your growth. So if you want to stay midget. Naruto was quick to screw his eyes shut when he was forcibly ejected from his own mind and back into the world of the living. Hastily he grabbed his own backside and let out a silent prayer when he found no trace of tails sticking out of his behind. Feeling his fingers, he also deducted that his nails had reverted back to normal as per Kyuubi's prediction. Now all he had left was to do the hard part. Ever so slowly he cracked open his eyes, flinching at the dazzling brightness despite his sunglasses. Slowly letting his eyes adjust, he opened them more, until finally he was able to look about without feeling a stabbing pain. Damn, she was right about the sensitivity. I wonder how I look though, and what was that about developing traits similar to bloodline limits? It would be cool to have something like the Sharingan eyes, it would the very least piss of Sasuke Tem. Standing up, he decided to go downstairs to the bathroom to find a mirror. Opening the door caused a new set of problems, however. Inari, upon seeing his new hero emerging from the room, promptly leapt up and started to question him in what, to Naruto, seemed like a deafening voice. After he had managed to get over the initial pain and had quieted Inari down, an easy task of actually asking him to talk in whispers and then instructing him to go tell Tsunami the same thing, he headed for the bathroom. Once there, he shut his eyes, removed his sunglasses and slowly began the process of eye-opening again. After about 5 minutes he finally managed to open his eyes and actually see enough to make out his own mirror image. Staring at him from the mirror was, well, him, Naruto. A Naruto with blue eyes, but instead of the usual, this one had slit pupils in those cerulean eyes he was so proud of. They had reminded him of the Yondaime after all. Also the whisker marks that he had were now a bit thicker. Now for the real test. Yelling back in his mind, he managed to coax a few tips out from Kyuubi, who quite frankly considered this something that absolutely could wait, until after the meal at least. Naruto then proceeded as per the instructions to channel some chakra into his eyes, and to his amazement the eyes turned crimson. They also felt different, something which Kyuubi said confirmed that they had some special effect. She also suggested that Naruto should keep his eyes activated during training and in any unusual situation until such a time when he found out exactly what their speciality was. Feeling pleased with himself, Naruto donned his sunglasses and headed downstairs, only to find everyone else, with the exception of Sasuke, there. He glanced about. Everyone was staring at him, Kazama Naruto, son of the Yondaime. Not that anyone knew about it, but apparently Inari had made a number on how they were supposed to be quiet lest they hurt his ears. Deciding to make a Naruto-style entrance, he promptly channeled chakra into his teeth, making them grow into intimidating fangs, and then flashed his trademark grin, eliciting a chorus of gasps from his loving audience. Sakura, being herself, forgot to be quiet and yelled out for an explanation. Suddenly Naruto was feeling all hot and uncomfortable. Oh yes, when he had explained this all to Kakashi-sensei, they hadn't talked about a cover story. It wasn't like he could just say that, yeah well, got the Kyuubi, drained her powers so deal with it, or something. Grasping straws, he suddenly came up with a great idea. Being a notorious prankster had taught him how to make excuses after all. Ah please, keep it down, you are hurting my ears. You see, yesterday's events on the bridge caused me to, activate a bloodline limit. Just like Sasuke, except my speciality seems to be enhanced senses all around. Kakashi was quite pleased. Naruto had come up with a plausible explanation for his new look, the eyes and well the ears too, as they had become a bit more pointed, or so it seemed. There was something more in his posture that he noticed. The way Naruto carried himself, there was much raw untapped potential there, much more than there had been previously. Also the eyes offered a good excuse for him to spend some training time with Naruto the next day. He had actually been surprised that it was Sakura who asked if she was to guard Tazuna the next day, just to give Naruto a chance to get more used to his bloodline limit. All in all, he was quite surprised in Sakura's positive reaction. She had been ready to eat Naruto alive earlier but now seemed to be back to usual. He sighed. It had been a long day, and tomorrow would be another one. Good thing it would take another 2 weeks or so to get the bridge completed. He still needed to formulate his report to the Hokage and make some plan to stop the villagers from lynching his newfound nephew. Maybe he should teach him the Chidori, that would make them think twice. Or maybe he should track down Jiraiya and make him teach the kid the Rasengan. The Jiraiya option sounded pretty good, he needed the newest, Ika Ika Paradise, anyway. With that final thought, Hatake Kakashi fell into a dreamless sleep. He was uneasy, there was an ominous feel to the air. Swishing his 9 tails in agitation, the mighty Kitsune decided to go for a walk. Then there was sudden feel of vertigo when a vortex of violent energy was formed, sucking the demon towards its gaping maw. He tried to fight, bringing forth all the power he had gathered during the long years of his life, but to no avail. When the vortex finally died down, the great beast noticed that he was no longer on his native plane. Instead, the place felt as if it was part of the human world. Growling in frustration, the demon took notice of a considerably strong sealing circle, a circle that would contain one such as him for a few moments. Most curious, to summon me here against my will, and try to trap me with such trifles. What are these humans hoping to accomplish? His bloodlust began to rise, the humans had to be punished for this indignity. Glancing about, he took note of the humans who were positioned around the circle. Roaring in rage, the demon gathered chakra into his tails and slammed them against the irritating circle that was between him and his prey. The humans, he noted, were in a flurry of activity, trying desperately to complete series of hand seals for some unknown purpose. He would have none of that. Baring his impressive fangs, he roared again, this time in wicked glee as he felt the circle begin to give away. Incidentally, the humans seemed to notice this too. As their concentration began to break, the smell of fear was thick in the air. Then the circle gave away with a boom of finality, and the demon gathered his tails in preparation for a strike that would destroy these fools in an instant. That was when the jutsu hit. Pain, white-hot, blinding pain. Trying to rally his mental defenses against the onslaught of agony, he began to falter. Feeling defenses crumbling around him, he sought out what he surmised was his tormentor. And there was a man with a pale face, black hair and yellow eyes, and a Hittite sporting a leaf symbol. Konoha, why would they? The thought was cut short, when the pale-faced man completed another jutsu, bringing forth another wave of blinding agony. Amidst the searing pain, he could make out words, whispers, all repeating the same thing. For the glory of the leaf, by the order of the Hokage. Konoha will have your strength. Slowly but surely he let the whispers crawling within his skull take his sanity, only thing that mattered was revenge. Death to the bastards who had tried to steal his powers. And the pain wouldn't go away before he would make them suffer, and suffer they would. Minutes, hours, or maybe even days later, it didn't matter, because there had only been pain and rage. He had arrived to the hidden village of Leaf. With wild abandon he tore into the assembled ninjas who desperately tried to fend off the embodiment of their inevitable death. He reveled at the feel of tearing flesh, the sound of blood gushing when he tore the miserable rats apart. Then even through the insanity he could feel something powerful approaching. There, he recognized the man, standing atop a giant toad, was the leader of these fools. He would die, and with him the village would die as well. The moment of gloating came with a price though, when the Yondaime Hokage leapt on his head, right between the ears, and slammed something against his forehead. Then there was a familiar feel of vertigo and again a sucking vortex, then there was nothing. Naruto shot up from his bed, covered in sweat and breathing hard. He shivered at the memory of the dream, it had been vivid to say the least. Quickly patting his head and butt, he was relieved that he hadn't grown ears or tails or anything else weird. Shivering again at the memory of feeling relished by massacring humans, he decided to pay the bastard fox a visit. This had to be her fault anyway. He did pause to consider the feelings of agony he had felt during the dream, and decided that, maybe the ordeal of having his senses tweaked the day before hadn't really been all that painful. Then again, compared to what he had felt in the dream, shivering once more, he forced himself to relax and entered Kyuubi's den. To his utter amazement and dismay, the demon in question was sleeping, quite comfortably it seemed. Naruto blinked several times to make sure that yes, the demon was indeed asleep. He grinned when Kyuubi suddenly yapped lightly and began to twitch her legs. Damn, I wish I had a camera right now, this would be uber blackmail material, the queen of foxes dreaming like a small puppy. Too bad I don't know any water jutsus either, nothing like being doused with cold water for a wake-up call. Grinning to himself, Naruto decided to settle for the next best thing. Composing his face into best Uruka likeness, he drew a deep breath and let loose a bellow of Hora. Baka Kitsune. No sleeping during classes. The results were beyond his expectations. Kyuubi jumped up and promptly banged her head against the cage. After taking stock of the situation, she growled angrily at the boy, now rolling on the floor laughing. What the hell do you want, brat? Don't you know that it's middle of the night? She glared at Naruto, who was in the process of composing himself. And why in the blazes did you have to interrupt the best dream I've had in years? I was just about to pounce on that rabbit too. Naruto, who had just gotten over his fit of mirth, got slightly annoyed at this. You dream about rabbits, huh? Well, for your information, I just had a very nasty dream, and I was you in that dream. Basically, I got sucked into somewhere, then subjected to a whole lot of pain, and then massacred better part of Konoha's ninja forces. So, I was wondering if you could tell me why the hell do I would see something like that. The last part came out as something between a demand, request and accusation, and was accentuated by agitated swishing of the two bushy tails that he sported while in Kyuubi's realm. The said demon was quite thoughtful. So the kid had the same dream. Curious as to how he would see it, I wonder. Sniffing slightly, she took in the smells that were wafting from Naruto. There was strong smell of sweat mingled with agitation, and quite surprisingly only a minute scent of fear. She giggled to herself, quite the kid indeed. That was how I remember it happening. I had the same dream. But tell me, did you have any other fox-like dreams? When Naruto indicated negative, she pondered for a moment before explaining. I told you that it wasn't my conscious choice to attack Konoha. It's possible that I, on a subconscious level, wanted you to see what really happened. You see, Kit, I need to gain your trust, and subconsciousness is something that even great demons such as I can't quite control. If it's any consolation, I promise that I will do my best to keep any other such unpleasant dreams from you. There really wasn't much Naruto could say to that. The explanation had been plausible, and Kyuubi did sound sincere and even apologetic, if such a term could be applied to her. He was here anyway, so why not seize the moment? Making himself comfortable, he glanced at the demon and began to inquire about what was going to learn today. So, Kyuubi-chan, what wi? He got now further before being knocked on his back by a furious roar from the newly named Kyuubi-chan. You will not call me that. I absolutely detest that name. If you wish to call me with an endearing name, then call me Q-chan. The last part was squealed in overtly cute and girly voice. Naruto naturally fell flat to his face and lay in a twitching heap. When he finally got up, he kept his distance and shot wide-eyed glances towards the cage. Oh, come on now, Kit. You seriously think I care what you call me? If you think me as Kyuubi-chan, then you do. And judging by the eager expression you had on your face, you were about to ask me what you should be learning today. She snickered at the boy's startled face. So easy to read, this one. He really should get some lessons in keeping a game face, or get a mask like his uncle. You have set of new senses, claws which will serve as efficient weapons if you learn to use them, and a pair of tails which can be used for similar purposes. Logically, one would start with them. Also, I would do some more chakra control exercises, as most kitsune abilities require quite precise control, and that control will greatly help you in learning new jutsus as well. Naruto opened his eyes to find himself back on his futon. Judging by the sound of breathing, Sasuke was still asleep, but Kakashi seemed to be awake, so he muttered a low greeting. Smelling food, he decided to get up and go see if Tsunami required any help in the kitchen. Kyuubi had been implying that he might stay short if he didn't start eating stuff besides ramen, and since he didn't know how to cook, after Naruto snuck out from the room and towards the stairs Hatake Kakashi sat up. He had been awake for the past 2 hours, woken suddenly by Naruto who bolted upright, then slumped back onto his futon and then, just as suddenly, dressed and simply walked out. He really needed to find out what had happened, but that could wait until they could speak in private. Shrugging, he too got dressed and proceeded to shake Sasuke to see if he was feeling well enough to come downstairs for breakfast. Half an hour later, everyone had gathered downstairs to eat. Sasuke's attendants had brightened up the table, even if Sasuke himself was in a surly mood. He had immediately noticed Naruto's eyes and felt, quite frankly, annoyed. How dare the dope activate a bloodline limit, specifically something that looked like a dujutsu? It would be insufferable to have someone compare him, the rookie of the year, to the dead last of the academy. It got worse, however, when Sakura, seeing his weakened state, took it upon herself to feed him, causing him irritation to no end. And then, she began to babble about Naruto's new abilities, making sure that she stated, multiple times no less, that the vaunted Sharingan would definitely be stronger and that he was stronger. Naturally, this didn't sit well with Inari, to whom world now revolved around Naruto. He began to argue in loud voice that Naruto was super strong and not a pale, super wimp like Sasuke. This led to a cataclysmic disaster in the form of Mt. Sakura erupting. Naruto could only grin at the insult. That was something that he couldn't say without an instant and painful retaliation from Sakura, who, despite being pissed at the brat who was slandering the love of her life, could not bring herself to beat up a small kid. Finishing his breakfast, he decided that it was time to leave, so he excused himself and raced out the door while donning his sunglasses. Back at the table, Kakashi was watching the argument between Sakura and Inari with interest. He also noted that Sasuke was trying to get his attention while he, feigning ignorance, concentrated on the bickering, obviously wanted to know more about Naruto's bloodline, but simply could not bring himself to ask about it. Seriously, Kakashi thought, if he wants to know, then he should ask about it. He needs to open up more anyway, and making him talk would be a step towards the right direction. Finally, growing tired of not getting noticed, Sasuke all but growled at his sensei. Now what is this all new bloodline limit the dope suddenly developed? What does it do exactly? Kakashi's eyelid drooped lazily until it covered about half of his visible eye, and he let out a contemplative, well, it does, we really don't know. Smirking behind his mask, he watched the Uchiha heir's countenance darken with barely held anger. Before the boy could speak up, Kakashi continued. You saw some of the visible changes that have taken place. What basically happened is that when the bloodline limit kicked in, Naruto developed enhanced senses. Eyes, ears, nose and the like. Sasuke mulled over the information for a while, then proceeded to question further. So basically he has developed senses of a cat or something. I mean, the eyes looked bit cat-like. Kakashi thanked the kami for his mask, which kept his relieved expression safely hidden. He had been dreading that Sasuke would associate the eyes with a fox for some reason, while they did really resemble cat eyes more. He nodded in agreement with Sasuke's declaration and then pulled out his infamous orange. He needed something familiar to fall back to. Sasuke, on the other hand, was contemplating this new information. So the dope had actually gotten a better nose. Big deal, PPPFT, I'll still kick the dope from here to Konoha. It's not like he's going to get stronger from smelling things. With this final though, which brought out a self-satisfied smirk, Sasuke decided that he still needed to rest a few days. Several hours later, Kakashi came to the clearing where Naruto was practicing. He noted several things at once. There was a broken tree that looked as if it had been hit extremely hard, and that there was another tree with a Naruto-shaped dent in it a good 20 yards away from the first tree. More interesting were the facts that Naruto was sporting quite menacing claws and bit disquieting, crimson eyes. Also, there was an eerie shimmering or distortion that moved in the air behind the boy. Clearing his throat, he brought the blonde's attention to himself. He only raised an eyebrow when the claws, fangs in the distortion disappeared and the eyes turned back into blue. With curiosity barely held back, he sat on a rock and asked, "So Naruto, how's the new body coming along?" Finally, now he had someone to brag about all the cool senses he'd gotten. Not to mention the chakra boost, and, trembling with excitement, he proceeded to tell all he'd found out about himself so quickly that any listener would make out about quarter of the actual content. After a swift bonk to the head and a stern order to calm down and explain things, slowly, he began again. "It was awesome when I came out from the house and entered the forest. There were so many sounds, the leaves rustling, birds chirping, running water and the like. And the smells, I have identified 9 different woodland animals already." The last bit was exclaimed in proud tone. "Let's see. Yeah, after I got the hang of being outdoors and actually could concentrate on my immediate surroundings without being overwhelmed by the sounds and smells, I started to experiment with my own body. The thing is, I got more than I bargained for. You saw the claws, fangs and eyes, and my tails." Naruto's grin widened, matching the widening eye of his sensei. There was a moment of silence, after which Kakashi managed to utter in a strained tone, "What tails?" This question was quite unexpected. What, was he blind? Surely he had seen the neat-looking tails he manifested when tapping into Kyuubi's chakra, or when he focused his own chakra into his rear. Doing just that, Naruto brought his newly formed tail to the fore. To his amazement, there was no tail there, only a slight distortion in the air. Dumbfounded, he grabbed a hold of the distortion and held on tight, while listening to Kyuubi's amused explanation in his mind. "It would seem that your tails are invisible to the normal eye, Kit. Perhaps your ability to see them was a result of using my chakra, or perhaps you simply need to activate your, what was it you called it, Shinkugan." Kakashi watched in amazement as the distortions he had seen earlier reappeared and moved in front of Naruto, who suddenly seemed to be amazed as well. His amazement only grew when the boy seemed to grab the distortion and stare into space after that. Then Naruto's eyes turned crimson again and the boy let out a small sigh of relief. And relieved he was. Naruto could again see his cool-looking, flaming red bushy tails with white tips. Swishing the tails around with a feel of contentment, and pointedly ignoring Kyuubi's giggles for fox-like behavior, he turned to look at Kakashi with a wide grin. Stroking one of his tails, and lashing the other out to encircle Kakashi's hand, he declared, "These tails." It took about an hour to explain it all, how tapping to Kyuubi's chakra would manifest tails, claws and fangs and turn his eyes crimson, and how he could channel his own chakra to create a similar effect. Kakashi was sufficiently shocked when he learned that Naruto had, in addition to his enhanced eyesight, gained something extra. Frowning, he began to mentally list possible ways to test and bring out the full extent of his nephew's new ability. Leaning backwards, he glanced at the sky overhead. You can see your tails when you activate your ability, tails which are made at least partially of chakra, that would indicate an ability akin to the Byakugan of the Hyuga clan. Then again, you can't seem to be able to see actual flow of chakra. Most curious. We should test if your eyes help you see through genjutsu or if they help you memorize jutsus. Nodding to himself, he continued to rattle of possible abilities, ignorant to the fact that Naruto was getting bored, as he had already heard pretty much the same from Kyuubi. Deciding to interrupt his sensei, Naruto pointedly cleared his throat. Feeling a questioning eye on himself, he began. "Then there is the fact that I'm slightly stronger and faster than before. Nothing major, but still there's a difference. On a related note, my chakra reserves have increased noticeably." At this he blushed a bit and pointed at the damaged trees. "See, Kyuubi suggested that I keep working on my chakra control, as some of the kitsune abilities that I should be able to use require good control, so when I tried to climb the tree I actually gathered what I thought was sufficient chakra and tried to run up the tree, only to have the tree splinter and blow me across the clearing and into the other tree. He then walked at another tree and firmly planted his foot on it, then lifted his other foot and began to walk up the tree. He did waver a bit, but all in all it was quite the performance. As you can see, I think I got it right. Motioning for him to come down, Kakashi could only feel proud of his student. He had during the explanations taken note of the fact that Naruto's clothing seemed bit small for him. It clicked when he said something about strength. Naruto had practically overnight developed much more bulk than previously. Not that he was a walking mass of muscle, but still it showed. Good thing too, because now Kakashi had a good excuse to steer him towards proper ninja dress code. Seriously, bright orange was not the color of choice for covert operations. And then there was the issue of teaching him a new jutsu that would suit his abilities quite well. When Naruto came down from the tree, he was amazed to see Kakashi removing shin guards and then handing them to him. Naruto inspected the leather-covered armor plates with a confused look but put them on at the Junin's insistence. After he had secured the pieces on his legs, he looked up and asked, "So what are these? Some ultra-powerful ninja equipment or something?" He could almost see a sadistic gleam in Kakashi's eye when he began a rapid series of hand seals. Finishing the seals, Kakashi began to examine the now quite startled genin. After Naruto had run around the clearing a few times as per orders, Kakashi frowned and began a new set of seals. Again he motioned Naruto to do a few laps around the clearing. His frown deepened, the boy looked barely winded. Time to up the ante. Again hands blurred, forming seals. This time to his relief, Naruto was moving sluggishly when ran around. After a few dozen push-ups, pull-ups and sit-ups, Naruto was barely able to draw breath. Smirking behind his mask, Kakashi proceeded to explain. "I take it that you have already noticed that moving is somewhat difficult. There are special seals engraved on the plating of those shin guards, seals made by your father, that is. I actually have his bracers that are identical to those, but they are back in Konoha, so in the meantime I'm lending you these. You should stick to your normal training regimen and take these off or cancel the effect only when you are bathing or sleeping or in a serious fight." He struck a teacher-like pose. Now most shinobi try to increase their strength, stamina and speed by wearing weights, weighted clothing or carrying around extra equipment. This is all well and good, but consider yourself wearing a weighted suit on a mission. You need to wear the weights over a long period of time to gain most benefit from wearing them, and you are on missions about half of your time. If you get into trouble, there's no time to start removing any weight suits or the like. Thus Arashi-sensei created these small metal pieces that mimic the effects of a weight suit by genjutsu, and it only takes a word to dispel the effect. He really was a genius when it came to crafting seals. Ending his lecture, he checked the position of the sun and decided that lunch would be ready soon. Flipping open a scroll pouch, he pulled out 2 scrolls and tossed them to Naruto, then turning around, started to walk out of the clearing. Just as he reached the forest's edge, he stopped and turned his head to look at the bewildered boy. "There are the seals required to change the intensity of the genjutsu. And a new jutsu for you. I think it will suit your new abilities quite well. I'm sure you are familiar with it, as it is the Kirigakure no Jutsu." He turned again but stopped and turned back for the last time. "Oh, and if you want to advance your chakra control, try water walking." With that he vanished, leaving a stunned Naruto behind. Naruto had been startled when Kakashi began to flash through hand seals all of the sudden. Then he had grown initially bored when ordered to run around in circles. It was stupid, or had been, until he noticed that he had trouble walking, let alone running, with his usual bounce. The blonde had been somewhat reluctant for such a tremendous increase in his workload and was about to object until he heard few magic words like increase and speed. It annoyed him to no end that whatever he did, Sasuke Tem was always faster. Not to mention that this training method was designed by his father. That fact alone made it worth trying. His objections now forgotten, Naruto was eager to get back to training when Kakashi tossed him 2 scrolls of all things. He had expected to get some instructions on how to cancel the genjutsu, but to get the whole set of instructions in a new jutsu scroll to boot. He was now ecstatic, but before he could flip open the Kirigakure scroll, he was stopped cold by Kyuubi's commanding, "Not now, Kit, save the scroll for later. You have plenty of time to study it tomorrow when you are guarding the bridge." As for now, I suggest you learn how to dispel the genjutsu on those shin guards and then get to the water walking exercise your sensei mentioned, a reasonably good idea, coming from a mere mortal. And so it went for the next few days. Naruto was alternating between practice and guard duty. The practice consisting walking on water and climbing trees while trying to focus on different scents or sounds at the same time, something which he was getting better at. He actually was able to take note of subtle differences in the background noises and scents while still focusing on the task at hand. It was what Kyuubi called awareness of the surrounding environment, which was natural to all foxes. Naruto had scoffed at this. The damn furball was always saying things like that, as if it was not a common trait among all wild animals. The guard duty didn't actually give Naruto much time to study his new scroll. Not that there were any threats or anything, but simply because there were so damn many workers, as nearly every able-bodied man and boy had volunteered to help in finishing the bridge. As such, Tazuna had been forced into mainly overseeing the work instead of doing actual work. Not that he minded really, he was after all an old man. Naruto, being himself, wasn't really all that interested in Tazuna's explanations on allocating manpower and finer points of logistics until the old man began to point out similarities between the bridge building effort and Konoha, and how a Hokage should know about allocating right resources for the right job. This naturally piqued Naruto's interest. He was going to be Hokage someday, so maybe it would be good to learn some tricks of the trade from a small scale replica. After the 5th day, Sasuke finally declared that he was feeling well enough to take part of the mission again. He really didn't want to waste time guarding some stupid bridge, but had been pointedly told that no guarding would mean no training. So he had decided that it was prudent to start guarding so he could get back to training. Naruto might have a tiny bit closer to his level while he had been lazing about. When sun rose the next day, Naruto had already gobbled down his breakfast and was sitting cross-legged near a stream. His face was a mask of intense concentration, with an elongated canine poking from his mouth indicating that he was channeling Kyuubi's chakra. This went on for an hour or so until suddenly a small ball of bluish flame sprang from his palm, and winked out from existence the next second. Naruto blinked at his palm, then released Kyuubi's chakra and wiped his sweaty forehead. Even if his chakra control had improved in bounds and leaps during the last few days, and he was using Kyuubi's chakra which was innately more kitsune-like than his own, this was going to be harder than anything he had done before. He stood up and splashed his face in the stream. Good thing he had grabbed a few rice balls in case he'd stay out here over lunch because he was already feeling bit hungry. He was munching on a rice ball when he heard a piteous sound that was a mixture of whimper and mewing. Cautiously following the sound to its origin, he found the most miserable sight of his life. There lay a thoroughly wet and obviously exhausted ball of reddish fur. To say that Naruto was amazed was an understatement. He immediately knew that the creature in front of him was a small fox, but still it was the first time he'd seen a real fox. That really wasn't the source of his amazement, it was rather the burst of maternal emotions that he felt coming from Kyuubi. The said demon was at the time giving instructions to her vessel. This kid is thoroughly exhausted and probably afraid. Tap into my chakra, it should give you more familiar feel and lessen the little one's fear. Then slowly take off your jacket and put her into it, then head back to the house. Soon after, Naruto was running towards the house carrying a sleeping kit that was wrapped in his coat. It had been surprisingly easy to gain the kit's trust. All it had taken was leaking out a little Kyuubi's chakra, something which the kit seemed to recognize instinctively, and a strategically placed rice ball. Running over the list of instructions from Kyuubi, Naruto tightened his grip on the nest he was carrying and opened the door only to meet the inquisitive eyes of both Tsunami and Kakashi. Shrugging, he motioned them to be quiet and continued to elaborate. I found this poor thing in the forest, by the stream. She was wet and obviously exhausted, so I figured she could bunk with us till we find her parents. Needless to say, neither Kakashi, who was well aware of what was sealed in Naruto, nor Tsunami, who was instantly taken by the sheer cuteness of the small animal, objected. Tsunami went a step further and offered to get the poor little thing a plate of milk and some minced meat. As both items were on the approved foods list, Naruto readily agreed. Taking the milk and meat and collecting his new pet, Naruto made his way to the room where he set his jacket on the farthest corner. Then he, still tapped into Kyuubi's chakra, pulled out a futon and placed it near the fox and tried to recreate the bluish flame he had managed to form earlier. Sometime after lunch, which was delivered to him by a curious Tsunami, the kitsune cub woke up. She poked her head from the pile of orange jumpsuit and looked about. There was the weird, two-legged fox that shed its fur and had an odd feel about him. She decided that a small yap would bring about some attention. When he heard the yap, Naruto let his concentration slip. He had managed to recreate the flame several times and had managed to hold it together for almost 2 seconds this time. Focusing on the kid, he then realized that he had no means of communicating with the fox and decided to ask for help. A question of, "Hey Foxy, you wouldn't happen to have a trick that would make me understand Fox now, would you? Or better yet, a trick that would make her talk human?" was promptly answered. "Yes, and yes. Pick her on your lap and come to see me. Baka Kitsune, I can't bring stuff over, can I?" There was a growl in his mind. If you couldn't, then why the hell were you wearing that thing you call a nightcap when you were here after the nightmare? Just try it. Shrugging, Naruto slowly reached at the kid, who seemed to tense but allowed itself to be taken into his lap. Then, going through the now familiar process of relaxing his mind, he, and to his surprise the small kid, were in Kyuubi's den. The small kid looked about in stunned silence, then let out a yelp which translated itself as, "Wow, where are we?" In Naruto's mind. Without thinking, he answered with a court, "Kyuubi's place," and was about to elaborate when he realized that he had actually understood the fox. His bewilderment was apparently obvious, judging by the multitude of giggles coming from Kyuubi's cage. Shaking herself out from the mirth, Kyuubi leaned closer to the gate and said, "Greetings, little one," as the other said, "You are in my place now. I am Kyuubi, queen of the foxes." At the last part, Kyuubi glared at Naruto as if daring him to snicker at the title. The small kid was odd though. She was young, yes, barely 7 weeks of age, but still she had heard of Kyuubi. She had to wonder what had really happened. But that could wait. The revered Kyuubi was speaking again. "This kidling found and saved you. Now he would help you find your parents after you have recovered. It might be easier if you would be able to communicate on the outside world as you can hear, so I'm going to activate some of your inheritance, something that happens to only a few and select kitsunes. This will help you to understand what he is saying, and in time will give you the ability to speak the language of men." She then turned her gaze from the awestruck kid towards now cautious Naruto. With a honeyed tone she continued, "As for you, I'll surrender more of myself to the seal. Don't worry, I'll be careful this time, and it will only hurt a bit." With that last and, at least to Naruto, rather worrisome statement, red chakra began to ooze through the gates, quickly enveloping both Naruto and the fox cub. Moments later, Naruto opened his eyes only to regret it instantly. The pain hadn't really been all that bad, but damn, what a headache. Feeling the pulsing pain diminish somewhat, he opened his eyes again and looked down, only to meet a gaze of 2 golden brown eyes with slitted pupils. After a moment of mutual staring, Naruto decided to break the silence and asked, "So, did you really learn to speak, or was that old hag all talk?" Not really expecting an answer, he was surprised to see the kid opening her mouth and trying to voice something out. Then she tried again, and again, but the words simply wouldn't form. Noticing the effort, Naruto asked incredulously, "You can actually understand what I say but can't form the words to answer?" Seeing the kid bob her head, he whistled with appreciation. "So maybe I could understand you as well. Why don't you try, yapping at me or something?" The little kitsune let out a long series of yaps, barks and growls which loosely translated as, "Who are you? Was that really Kyuubi-sama? Where am I? And you smell funny." Sighing at the kid, Naruto proceeded to explain at length. By the time he had finished, Akai-chan, as the kid was named by her parents, was resting comfortably in a baby carrier that circled Naruto's shoulders and hung against his chest. The baby carrier had been provided by Tsunami, who on her way to get the dishes had spent a good 15 minutes petting the ecstatic kit. At Kyuubi's suggestion, Naruto had stressed the importance of not trying to speak human when there were others near, not that Akai really could do much more than mouth the beginning of the word, Naruto, in a rather comical way. It was okay to yelp at Naruto, who could then relay the message as a gut feeling or something. The new addition to Team 7 was received in overall good spirit. Sakura naturally was no better than Tsunami and instantly fell in love with the adorable little ball of red fluff. She actually didn't want to let go of the kid until she started to yap at Naruto to come and rescue her. It was time to eat after all. Sasuke coldly dismissed Akai as an annoying rodent that Naruto should keep away from him. And then there was Kakashi, who simply rose his eyebrow and decided that explanations could wait for the next day. That didn't keep him from petting the little animal tentatively or from realizing that he really wasn't all that surprised to see a small fox dangling from Naruto's shirt, not really after all that had happened in the past week. The next day, Naruto and Akai, who was hitching a ride in the baby carrier, set out on a brisk pace. Following the stream, they came soon enough to the place which Akai recognized. Tapping into Kyuubi's chakra, Naruto began to follow the scent of fox that was permeating the area. Not much later, a family of 6 foxes came to view, causing Akai to struggle out from the baby carrier. The adult foxes, after doing a hasty check on Akai, continued to stare at Naruto, who was quite unsure what to do. He was about to ask when the male fox suddenly whirled and vanished into what seemed to be a passage in their den. Naruto only smiled at Akai, who was giving an embellished version of her adventures to now obviously jealous litter mates. He was just about to ask Akai about her father when the said male returned, followed by an aged, almost silver-colored, fox. Naruto instantly recognized the newcomer as important one when the cubs stopped their play and quieted down. The elderly fox then slowly and deliberately stepped in front of the boy and bowed respectfully. "How may we thank you for saving one of our own, mistress?" it asked in a clear voice. Naruto, after picking his jaw from the ground, proceeded, much to Kyuubi's amusement, vehemently deny being a mistress of any kind. He then began to explain the whole set of events that had led to him meeting Akai and so on. The story, which was translated into Fox by proudly grinning Akai, kept the entire Fox family captivated. While the adults were still digesting the story, the cubs led by Akai pounced on the hapless Naruto, who soon fell laughing under the onslaught. After a while, the cubs calmed down and Naruto began to think of leaving. He had grown fond of the small kid, but still, this was her family. He thanked the old fox and was about to bid his farewell to Akai, only to find the kid safely tucked in her baby carrier. He petted the small animal and in a sad tone said, "Look, Akai-chan, this is your home, your family." He was going to continue to explain about the prejudice and hatred he faced in Konoha and reasons as to why she couldn't possibly come with him, when the old fox, and to his surprise, Kyuubi interrupted. "She has made her choice, Kit. It's now up to you if you will take her with you. There will be responsibilities of a pack leader and, to an extent, older brother." Naruto looked from the Kitsune family, who were staring at him expectantly, to the small adorable eyes that belonged to his self-proclaimed sister. "Ah, what the hell, I got over the shock of having Kakashi as an uncle, so I guess I can take having a Kitsune Nichan." Reaching to scratch Akai between the ears, he said, "Guess you and me are going to stick together then." After a series of long goodbyes and earful of good advice to both, Naruto and Akai began their trek back home. They were, however, only halfway when Kyuubi presented yet another ideal training mission. Kakashi was intrigued, to say the least. He had grown bored soon after giving Sakura her training objectives for the day and had decided to check up on Naruto. After an hour of futile searching, he had decided to find a comfortable tree branch and had begun leafing through Ika Ika Paradise Volume 3. Still, he found it difficult to concentrate on the normally very captivating content of his favorite series. The fact was that Naruto, and Kyuubi for that matter, had gone to find the family of a fox cub that had very conveniently appeared. There was always a possibility of a deception, something that kitsunes who were notorious tricksters were more than capable of pulling off. After deciding that he should renew his search for the boy, he had summoned one of his nin dogs and ordered him to track Naruto's scent, and had been following the dog when he came face to face with the scene in front of him. Naruto, while in good mood, was still trying to figure how the hell he was going to explain Kakashi the fact that he now had a fox as a sister and pack mate. Shrugging inwardly, he took note of Akai, who was happily chasing a butterfly, and moved the deer carcass that he was carrying on better position. Both he and Akai came to halt almost simultaneously when they all but stumbled on a very, very interested-looking Kakashi. Smiling bit sheepishly, Naruto shifted the deer on his shoulders again. "Ah, Kakashi-sensei, there's really a very good explanation for this." And so the days went by. Team 7 had now split their shifts into one day of guarding, one of training, and one of resting. For Sasuke, this meant that he was on the bridge one day, then trained one day and did his best to avoid Sakura the other. For Sakura, it was guard duty, little training and fawning over Sasuke. And for Naruto, it was really guarding and learning from Tazuna one day, training chakra control and trying to get his fox fire to last more than a few moments, and teaching Akai, combined with a healthy amount of playing, the other days. Kakashi simply sneaked about, watching as Naruto honed his stealth skill by hunting wild animals for Tsunami to cook, watching Sasuke try to evade the lovesick Sakura, and doing what he usually did when he had too much time on his hands, reading his beloved Orange. After a few weeks, the bridge was finished, and so was the first serious mission of Genin Team 7. For Naruto, it had been busy time. He had found out that the malicious demon Kyuubi wasn't actually all that bad, for a demon anyway, had found out who his parents were and had found a relative, heck, he had even adopted a sister. Now they were heading home, leaving behind the newly named Great Naruto Bridge. Naruto's backpack was bulging with gifts, now they given to him but were actually for Akai-chan. He had an assortment of chew toys, a food and water bowl, few balls, and a plethora of toys in general. Akai-chan had certainly wormed her way into everyone's heart. Even the usually cold Sasuke had been seen petting the little kid on an occasion. Naruto could only chuckle as he thought how the good citizens of Konoha would react to a sight of a small ninja fox, complete with a miniature Konoha Hittite that she now wore around her neck, marking her as an official member of Team 7, walking down the streets of their beloved village. Other than that, Naruto had improved drastically. He had pretty much mastered the art of tuning out background noise while still remaining alert to any changes. For the smells, he could now identify most common smells and could easily pick out his teammates by their specific scents. He had also found that his claws didn't only look intimidating but could easily be converted as vicious slashing or stabbing weapons. And then there were the tails that he surmised were the more useful part of his new arsenal. They could be used for grappling as well as clubbing someone. He stopped his listings to stare at Sasuke's back. "Up yours, Sasuke-tem. I even found out what the Shinkugan does. Maybe I can't just monkey any jutsu I see, but still." It had been a week earlier when Naruto and Kakashi had been able to determine at least one of Shinkugan's features. Kakashi had taken it upon himself to teach the boy his father's knowledge and had decided to start with taijutsu, something that he had easily copied with the Sharingan. Naruto, with his new eyes activated, had not been able to copy, but rather to understand the taijutsu forms he was being taught. He was able somehow to see the purpose of each move, what they were meant to do, how they flowed from one to the next, and also to an extent memorize them. All in all, he had in a few days adapted the lower tiers of the Yondaime's taijutsu, which was specifically designed to work in conjunction with Hiraishin no Jutsu and the Rasengan. From what they, and Kyuubi for that matter, had deducted, Naruto couldn't copy anything on the spot, instead he needed to practice the said taijutsu in order to use it himself. The ability to break down and analyze any given taijutsu move was a distinct advantage though, if you could see what the purpose of the move, or a series of moves was, you could easily formulate a proper defense or counter-attack against it. This was shown in action when Kakashi had to admit that if Naruto would have had his claws extended he would be suffering from a severely torn, if not totally ruined, hand. Besides all that, Naruto now had an extra set of ears and a sharp nose that were fiercely loyal to him. Akai-chan had become almost inseparable from him. The kid was still only a pup but had proven to be an asset. She was for one a very light sleeper and woke up at the slightest of sounds, unlike Naruto, who despite his keen ears could sleep through an all-out battle. Smirking to himself, Naruto picked up the said kid and placed her in the baby carrier. The gates of Konoha were just beyond the next bend and foxes were not generally liked in the Leaf Village. He was really looking forward to seeing the villagers gape in impotent rage when he strolled around the streets carrying a fox in a baby carrier. At the least it would give them something to gossip about. Deep in his mind, Kyuubi was trying hard not burst out in uncontrollable fits of laughter. Kazama Naruto and Kazama Akai had returned. TBC, in a week or so. Shinkugan means Crimson Eye. Kirigakur no Jutsu means Hidden Mist Technique. Hiraishin no Jutsu means Flying Thunder God Technique. Akai means red. Author's rant again. Well, here's the second chapter of this FIC. I know there was the "in a week or so" written after the TBC in the last chapter, but I, for better or worse, seem to have caught cold. And seeing as there is the worst ever winter storm outside, decided that it would be prudent to skip school. Thus, after being bored, I decided to write this chapter. If the storm continues and/or my cold continues, expect an update later this week. As it is, I've tried to address some issues pointed out by the reviewers, namely trying to start a new paragraph every time the speaker changes and overall improve the formatting. Seriously though, I have absolutely no eye for layout, so don't expect too much there. Anyway, at least I tried, right? Do, or do not, there is no trying. Now I know that giving Naruto a fox cub as a companion, sister, whatever is a real cliché. I debated with myself whether or not I should dump Akai. I decided to keep her in the FIC mainly because she's there to add some fluff. Literally, there really won't be much of fluff or general romance until after the Chunin exams anyway. Also, Akai-chan, being so darn cute, will be a nice factor when we start the club for rabid Naruto fangirls. Another real clichés are the Foxfire and the Dujutsu. Foxfire I ripped off from Shippo in Inuyasha and from Wikipedia's Kitsune page. I just felt that it would be cool to have some innate Kitsune abilities for Naruto, and I have a few practical combat-oriented uses for Foxfire, like say Flaming Rasengan. Closing parenthesis. The Dujutsu was more debatable. Seriously, there are tons of fics in which Naruto can either A. See Chakra B. See through Genjutsu C. Create Genjutsus, including the ability to trap people with Kyuubi D. Copy Ninjutsu E. Copy Taijutsu, or G. A combination of the above listed ones. I tried to be slightly original here by taking an analytic approach on the whole Taijutsu issue, which I feel is Naruto's greatest weakness, along with his chakra control. Also about Naruto seeing his tails only when his Shinkugan is active. They are composed of demonic chakra, so the Shinkugan can also see demonic chakra and its manifestations, or something. Oh, and did I mention the training? Weights? Let's not even go there, pretty please.